Hello YouTubers, this is VetterMTG again. As promised again in my introductory video, I'm going to be doing a deck tech on my personal favorite deck, not just in general, but first one I ever built on my own, first one I actually got put together. I love this thing immensely. It is Red Green Tron. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to be, well, putting out cards one at a time, letting you see them, and I'm not going to read them off or anything of that like that, but I'm going to explain why I did what I did in the building of this deck, and feel free to agree or disagree in the comments below. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to put my sideboard to this side for now. Okay. As with most builds that you've probably seen with Red Green Tron, they like to start off with an Emrakul up top. I've taken a different approach. I use Ulamog instead. Yes, he is more vulnerable, but he is much easier to cast, especially in modern tournaments, where sometimes you just don't have the time to get Emrakul out in the field. So there's Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre. Personally, as I've also seen in my personal meta in my game shop, a lot of people play Junk or Abzan, as it's also called, as well as Jund, amongst other things. These things came in handy, especially against a particularly infuriating Boggles deck that I went against. Ugin's a great card. Again, let me know what you think. This is pretty standard. 4 Karn Liberated. Another weird thing I do is I put 2 All Is Dust in my deck, again for the same relative reasons as Ugin. I've noticed again, a lot of my deck build is revolved around my own personal meta at my game shop. I would likely change things up if I played elsewhere, but this is what I do. Also pretty standard in a Red-Green Tron is 4 Wormcoil Engines, and also 2 Oblivion Stones again for board wipes. Now, I put 2 Spellskites in. This is a newer addition to my deck, and this is primarily to combat the Splinter Twin combo, which is, as you guys probably know, one of the nastiest things in Modern. What Spellskite can do is when Splinter Twin comes out in the field, instead of targeting whatever creature they're trying to untap and tap over and over and over again, instead I put Spellskite out there and direct the Splinter Twin to it so that it cannot be targeted. Those will likely be one of the first things sideboarded out depending on the game, but I keep them in there because Splinter Twin is very heavy. And then Sylvan Scrying to look for the Tron pieces, of course. 2 Pyroclasms to deal with those nasty affinity creatures. 4 Ancient Stirrings, again, digging for Tron pieces. At this point in time, I'm going to pause the video and create room for the rest of my cards. Okay, thank you for that. 1 Relic of Progenitus that handles, it's mainly graveyard hate, but the other purpose of it is to draw an additional card. Also standard 4 Expedition Maps, 4 Chromatic Stars, 4 Chromatic Spheres, an Eye of Ugin, 2 Ghost Quarters, and of course, the mainstay and where the name of this deck comes from, the Urza Tron pieces for short, as they are aptly named. And here's my one weakness in this deck. I run 4 Carplusion Force as opposed to 4 Grove of the Burn Willows. This is solely for monetary reasons. Grove of the Burn Willows is infinitely better in this deck. This is what I've chosen to play as sort of my means of until I get the funding. And 1 Forest, which I picked up at full art because I think it's really cool looking. Anyway, the overall thought process to this deck is to formulate Tron as quickly as humanly possible. Anyway, that will likely be edited out then. Anyway, the whole point is to get that so that we can play these big baddies, mainly Karn. A turn 3 Karn will always throw your opponent off guard, of course, unless they have some sort of counter spell. And well, formulating the Tron pieces we accomplish by using these expedition maps, a relic to draw, as well as the chromatic star and chromatic sphere. Now, as you've noticed, I only have that a couple of sources to formulate green mana, which is, well, right here. The way around that is to use these stars and spheres to formulate green mana and then use them to play these ancient stirrings as well as these sylvan scryings to look for the Tron pieces, get them on the field as quickly as humanly possible, and basically beat your opponent down before they even know what happened. And Eye of Ugin comes in handy. Not only can you use it to pay for 5 mana for all his dust as opposed to 7 to do a board wipe, and of course to track down any Eldrazi pieces and pay them for cheaper, but it also serves as a means to get Worm Coil Engine out in the field quicker. What you would likely want to do is pass turn when you have your 7 Tron pieces available, and when your opponent is about to pass, you tap the 7, tap the Eye of Ugin, and grab a Worm Coil Engine. Your turn starts, you tap that same mana, put it out in the field, and you're ready to have some beatdown time. Anyway, I'm going to pause here to show you my sideboard and conclude the video. Thank you again for allowing me to do that. Anyway, my sideboard is odd compared to other Urza Tron setups. I don't have fire spouts in here or a couple of other things that are kind of a mainstay that please, again, remind me in the comments below. I've sideboarded an Emrakul the Eon's Torn. I usually take the Ulamog out for that if I realize that the opponent I'm playing against has a slower running deck. And as it's always joked, Emrakul is always enough in a game of Magic. Next thing I sideboard is Sundering Titan, which I will usually take an Ugin out for. And what this guy does is when he comes into play, you name every single land type. So if they have a bunch of different land colors, such as in Abzan or Jund, you play this guy. Now, he does only destroy one of each land because, well, frankly, if it destroyed all, that would be OP as all get up. Anyway, I only bring him in when absolutely necessary. He is also able to be fetched with Eye of Ugin, which is really cool. The 8 mana cost is not ideal, but it works. So in a meta where there's a lot of dual lands such as Overgrown Tomb, well, the list goes on and on. There's a whole slew of them. But anyway, my main point is that you can really, really mess with someone's mana base, and the only thing that could possibly happen to you is you might get rid of your one forest in a pinch. But hopefully they're playing something that has a forest or some variant of, and you can take it out. I love this card. It has saved me a lot of times, and the main thing that I use it for, as I previously mentioned, is multicolored decks. This thing is a monster against it. Next, I put in 2 defense grids. I will usually take out 2 chromatic spheres or maybe the 2 pyroclasms, depending, or, well, again, tell me in the comments what you think. This is for those counter decks, so they cannot counter you, because during each player's turn, spell played by another player cost an additional 3. So they're very cheap counter magic for 1, 2 blue. Becomes null and void with this defense grid out in the field, and you're able to get it out usually sooner than they can really do anything about it. So when you're trying to do something, there's nothing more infuriating than playing against a counter player that loves to screw up your world. With this, you're able to protect yourself to a certain extent and play like normal as opposed to waiting for them. Now, that being said, this does also affect you to an extent, but overall not really, because there really aren't that many instants in this deck whatsoever. So, Defense Grid's a good sideboard. Again, combating those counter decks, I just find this card funny. This is honestly one of my favorites because just watching a blue player's face drop when you put this out in the field is hilarious, but that's just me. Now, when I first started out, I thought Tron was invincible, and then I realized there was cards out there when I was still a very, very new player that destroys lands, especially the non-basic kind. So to combat that, I've put in Life from the Loam. What this does is it allows me to return up to 3 target lands from my graveyard to my hand, and I can do this as many times as I want using that dredge effect. This comes into handy very often when playing against things that destroy lands, and it's sideboarded only because there's not that many out there as of right now in my personal meta, but I leave it in there just in case. Next is 2 additional Pyroclasms. For this is only in here for affinity. I will take out the 2 All Is Dust, put these in there instead, and I will also take out my Ugins because they are really not very viable in an affinity matchup, but I will get to that later. Next is a second Relic of Progenitus. This is mainly for graveyard combo decks. It's graveyard hate and also allows me to draw cards as previously mentioned. Then I have 4 nature claims in here. Now these nature claims are also for affinity, or also it is very usable against burn decks. What you can do is, as opposed to destroying an opponent's artifact, you can put out your own relic, a map, well, hopefully not a map, but a star or sphere, and then destroy your own thing to give yourself life, buying you time. And then I forgot I had these in here, but these are my worm tokens that I really, really like that I got off eBay. And then the actual ones that I actually just picked up the other day. Well, that is my deck tech of red-green Urzatron. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions or want to tell me anything, please comment. Always remember to subscribe below and like the video. It helps me out. And, well, you guys be good to each other. Bye now.